Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back here to MotorMouth Broadcasting, and welcome here to the High Point GT Challenge. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me, working the comms and the cams, is Hamish Monroe. Well, Hamish, we come to the Brickyard here for another race from this championship. Only the third round from this season, and what a season it's been up to this point. But to keep the season rolling, we head to what, in my opinion, is the greatest racing facility in the world. I absolutely adore Indianapolis, maybe a little bit biased because I'm an IndyCar guy, but I still feel like this road course has some redeeming qualities. It's a track that's a bit mixed when it comes to the opinions that people have on this place. So I want to put you in the spotlight and ask what your thoughts are on this place.
Well, Ron, first of all, welcome to the MotorMouth Broadcasting channel. Secondly, I'm under the impression that the 2009 road course is the superior version of the Indianapolis road course myself. But I do think it is a great circuit. I think it's a great circuit for battling. It's a great circuit which offers you so many different strategy plays in terms of when you come into pit lane, when you use the draft to your advantage, how important the draft train is going to be around here. Similarly to tracks like Daytona and Charlotte, of course, with their road courses. But I think it's a tough track. It's tough on tires. It has those different composites of the track surface as well, so that will have a part to play. The weather will have a part to play too. Of course, 76 degrees Fahrenheit is the ambient temperature at the moment. And as qualifying is coming to an end, I mean, it's going to be an important night. I think qualifying is going to be less so important, more so than just how well you can do across this race, because after 60 minutes, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think the drivers are going to be. The ones who do well, they're not going to be the ones who necessarily qualify well. I think it's going to come down to keeping yourself clean, keeping yourself consistent, and keeping yourself in the battle the whole way out. That's what it's been in the first two rounds, and I think it's going to be the exact same here tonight at Indy.
Yeah, I think we're in for a good one. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, a bit of a departure when it comes to most other road oval tracks that we have here in the sim. Not a whole lot of the ovals being used, really, with the exception of the small little stretch heading down into turn number, I'm trying to do the other quick math in my head, turn number 12, I believe it is, right before you head down into that infield section they added in after the 2005 U.S. Grand Prix, and that whole fiasco, but that's a story for another day. But outside of that and that start finish straightaway, really don't use a lot of the oval here on the road course. I personally think it gives it character, but it's opinions are like noses. Everybody has them and they all smell. But as we are doing this broadcast and getting past qualifying now and switching over to the warm-up session, looked like a pretty good qualifying session with these GT3 and GT4 cars. To those who haven't tuned into the series before, we have 4 different classes to compete with here, with 2 different car types, those GT3s and GT4s. They may be one number apart when it comes to the names, but in terms of performance, they are rather big departures from each other. Wouldn't you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I do. I think, obviously the aero capabilities of the GT3 cars, they've got quite a bit more than what those GT4s do. Plus then just the size of the cars as well. That downforce has a big part to play in terms of controlling that tire wear. And then obviously the more obvious thing is the pace differential as well. The amount of power that can come out of those GT3 cars comparatively to the GT4s, and how well they can get the power down. GT4s can often, depending on your setup, they can often get to the stage of they almost feel like they're bogging down through some corners. And I think tonight, some corners that they may feel that possibly through turn 10. You mentioned turn 12 as well. Getting the power down on those GT4s is going to be very difficult through there. Then as well at 13. And then even some of the earlier sections too, such as up at turn 3 or turn 4. So I think for those GT4s tonight, it's a struggle to get the power down sometimes, get the grip up on them as well. But these guys have been racing together now for 2 weeks, obviously at Road America last week for round 2, which was an absolute blinder. But I think, it should be relatively easy tonight if you're in a GT4 car to deal with letting the traffic past you, because you've obviously got 2 massive long straightaways where you can just hang out on the left-hand side. The GT3s will just swing past you. And then in terms of if you're going to let them past in the corners or under brakes, you just stick to your line and they should be able to get by you pretty easily.
Yeah, I know. I have a feeling that this racetrack, it will be a good one in terms of lap traffic situations, but if you find yourself in a class battle, you may have to break those elbows out a little bit to get the moves done here. Obviously, the likes of turn 1 going to be a pretty good overtaking opportunity. Turn 7 as well. Really, you just think of the heavy braking zones as spots to get some moves done here. But if a driver has a trip up around this very challenging racetrack, that may be a spot to get some moves done as well. These drivers just have one more opportunity to hit the racetrack before this 1 hour long race that lies ahead. This quick little warm up session that we're in at the present moment doesn't look like anybody has some lap times on the board presently in it. But I will let you know that throughout the practice and qualifying sessions, looked like the GT3 drivers were tracking solidly inside the other high 124s to low 128s was the slowest time that I believe I saw in practice a little bit earlier on. Qualifying, of course, 15 minutes long, can certainly get hectic there. Saw a bit more disparity when it comes to that lap times in qualifying. A little bit quicker and a little bit slower as well. And meanwhile, in the GT4s, you're still looking at pretty spread out when it comes to the pace between the AM drivers in the GT4 AM category and the rookie GT4 racers. So you're looking at around about low to high 1 minute 30s in that GT4 category. Having a bit of pace disparity, though, it's good for us as broadcasters because it'll probably give us a whole lot of overtakes to talk about throughout tonight's race.
Yeah, I think it'll give us, yeah, I've said a lot of overtakes for us to talk about. But it should mean for those GT3 cars that the GT4s should eventually spread a little bit, which will then make their traverse through the lap traffic that little bit easier as well. I think for the GT4 cars, the race of attrition is going to be the most important strategy tonight. Keeping your car clean, keeping yourself in check as well, and just trying to maximize on some of that, some of those mistakes of the cars around you or the cars in your own class as well. The last 2 weeks, we've had some great battles in terms of fighting for not necessarily the race win in the GT4 AM class, but the race for P2 has been super, super close between some of those drivers of Lance Campbell, Cole Malley, and I think it was Tyler Hammond, actually, the last 2 weeks as well. But, I mean, those guys have shown some great pace. They've been very similar in terms of pace as well. So, it's going to be I think a very good night for those GT4 cars. For the GT3s, I think the main focus needs to be on trying to beat Nathan Biggett because he's currently 2-0 in the GT3 Pro class. And he looks very, very difficult to beat at the moment in that Mustang. Now, the BOP will have a part to play, obviously, this upcoming weekend, the Spa 24-hour. And I don't believe the Mustang is the strongest car going into that event at the moment, Ron. So that could swing things a little bit in the favour of some other drivers if they are in the more preferable car leading up to this next special event here on iRacing.
And I gotta say, the evolution that Mustang has gone on, both in real life and in the sim, has been truly staggering to see. A matter of a couple of seasons ago here on iRacing, that Mustang was about as quick as a trash bag full of mango pulp sliding down a flight of stairs. But now it's turned into a bit of a racer, so we have seen some drivers do very well in that Mustangs in seasons past. Let's see what they'll be able to do here. Now, though, we switch our attention into this race, and to get this up and rolling, let's take a look at the starting grid. Starting this race at the front is going to be Nathan Biggert. You can see him in the 01 car setting a 124.567. Good lap time from him. Rick was shown set to join him on the front row. Will be Justin Bach starting this race in P3 alongside Ryan Jolly. I apologize for I butchered name pronunciations during this broadcast. He'll be starting this race in fourth. Right behind will be Christian Ruiz in P5. David Steiner will start in sixth. There'll be Shelby Howe starting in P7 alongside Jed Calderman, my apologies, in P8. David Gallant will start in ninth with Tristan Richard rounding out your top 10.
Yeah, then we have Stephen Smith and Scott Petrone for your top 12. Then in behind them for the seventh row of the grid, Brennan Herzing and Kenneth Clodden then make up the top 14 with Brian Scott and Todd Beyer for the top 16. John Swan, Anthony Cronova then for your top 18 cars with Gerardo Camalinga alongside Mark Ogier for the end of the GT3 field. In behind them, Tyler Merritt starts pole for your GT4 AMs with Cole Malley, Lance Campbell and John Voigt for the 12th row of the grid.
And then looking right behind them, we've got the likes of James Langevin starting this race in P25. Quinn Moore in 26th. Alongside him on that 13th row will be Daniel Nans in P27. Tyler Hammond in 28th. John Drennan will start this race in P29 alongside Carlos Sierra in 30th. Christopher Coy will start in 31st alongside Wesley Strait in 32nd. Liam Habel will start in P33 alongside Aiden Keeley in 34th. Edward Delano will start in 35th alongside Johnny Janik in the 15 car. Starting this race in P36, Paul Escobar and Chris Franz will round out your top 38. And round out your starters. We'll note, though, that John Swan has not taken to the racetrack for the start of this formation lap. Not sure what the deal is with him, but not sure whether or not he will be taking to the start of this race, which is certainly going to be a barn burner here for round number 3 of the High Point Racing GT Challenge here at Indianapolis. It will be a long run down into turn number 1. These drivers, as much as it's good to get some moves done at the start, they will have to play with fire and maybe even walk on eggshells a little bit if they want to get some moves done and try and do it cleanly as they head their way off into turn number 1. It's a rolling start. These drivers closing up to the yard of bricks as the green flag is out and the drivers are on their way, looking like a pretty even keel start for both of our front row sitters, but we are going 3 wide already as they head their way down into turn number 1. It is a drag race between these 3, and let's see who's going to win out in that battle down into the turn. Looking very good for the Mustang. I'll lead them off comfortably down into turn number 1, but the fighting is still not going to be over as they head their way firmly into the infield.
Yeah, as Nathan Biggett leads the way at the moment on board the Mustang. We already saw Rick Richon and Ryan Bajole trying to put the pressure on him here early in this race. I did see some dropping of positions for some of the GT4 drivers prior to them making it to the start line as well. So these GT4 cars have been in and amongst it already as Edward Delano is already crossing the chicane there. But at the moment, the GT3s, well, Nathan Biggett seems to be on pure dominance mode once again. For whatever reason, the timing is slightly off as Tyler Merritt, the leader of the GT4 AM class, has gone round just on the latter half of the infield, and he's already dropped out of the lead now and down in towards P5 of class at this stage as Gerardo Camalinga has also pulled it up in the McLaren.
Yeah, not sure what the issue was for him as he came out of turn number 9, just decided to stop on the side of the racetrack. It's been a scrappy start in the GT4 category, but up at the front, GT3s has been rather clean. We follow him still. Your race leader of Nathan Biggett will continue to hold on to the race lead and pulling a bit of a gap as it stands presently, already scraping to about 2 seconds as he heads his way into the braking zone of turn number 1 for the second time, the first time fully under anger here after the drop of the green flag. So have an hour left of racing action left to go though, so as much as a 1.5 second gap may be big, that can just disappear in the blink of an eye.
It can indeed, and one small mistake can cost you massively, especially around Indy as well, where it's so tough to keep this car in check. I think right now at this stage of the race, just keeping those tyres in the temperature realm of grip and keeping yourself in check as well, Ron. I think that's going to be the main thing at the start of this race. Not overheating those tyres, not overwearing them early on as well, keeping them in line, and that should allow you just to keep that gap, if not pull away a little bit as well. The hope now for Nathan is that Ryan Bajole in behind him in P2 starts to get attacked by Justin Bock and then by Christian Ruiz and David Steiner and Shelby Hoff. Because if they start to attack him, that will allow Nathan just to pull away slowly, get out of tow range and get himself far and few in the lead, where these guys are still, tussling for position just for P2.
And for Bajoli, running P2 in that GT3 Pro category, that is not out of the realm of possibilities at all for him to slowly but surely lose ground and maybe drop down a couple of spots. If we see Bach involved in that battle and those two drivers really start to squabble up, we could maybe even see the likes of Steiner and Howe get involved in that battle as well. It may seem like a bit of a gap between Bach and Steiner at the moment at about 1.5 seconds, but with side-by-side racing, it'll basically feel like these drivers are dragging an anchor through asphalt. So it'll be tough to try and hold onto a gap like that if you're just constantly throwing haymakers at each other. That's how it stands at the moment in GT3 Pro. In GT3 Pro-Am, Ruiz holds on to the lead at the present moment. It's a 3.5-second gap between himself and Calderman in P2, and you have to go back to Claudin, about 2.5 seconds back of Calderman to round out your top three in GT3 Pro-Am. That class a little bit more spread out at the present moment. One thing I will say, though, and this may be potentially a controversial opinion, I like this sort of racing where you've got only two types of cars, but you've got two classes for each, because you've got that sort of interclass dynamic going on with the exact same style of race cars. You think of multi-class sports car racing, and you think of, okay, GT3s racing with the GT4s, but the same can be true about a GT3 Pro driver racing a GT3 Pro-Am, or a GT4-Am driver racing a GT4 Rookie. It just adds that little dynamic to it. Maybe I'm just sick in the head with some of the stuff I've said on the air over the years, broadcasting-wise, you could definitely tell, but I kind of like that interclass dynamic when you've got two different classes of drivers in the exact same classification of machines.
Well, I mean, you know, we get that obviously within IMSA, of course, of the GTD class. We have both the GTD Pro and then the GTD class as well. You look at GT World Challenge, you know, you get the gold, silver, bronze drivers that then make up your Pro-Am and amateur cars as well. So I think it's good when we can get this sort of racing happening amongst, you know, a league like this where you've got, you know, two different sets of cars or two different classes of cars with subclasses within them in terms of, you know, your pros and pro-ams for your GT3s and then your AMs and your rookies for your GT4 cars as well. I think one thing that I'm always a big fan of, and it kind of goes against, you know, drivers who select the car that's best suited to, you know, the meta, I guess we could say, Ron. I'm always under the impression, you know, I'm a league admin myself. What would it be like if you ran an event where you sold tickets for drivers to actually have to lock in a car, and if they don't get in early enough, they might miss out on a certain car? So you limit the amount of different manufacturers, because that's another way of you subcategorizing the field, and then you try and BOP it yourself. I think, you know, if you can get those, you know, separate classes, you then get limited amount of certain cars, it really opens up the possibilities to try to make your series as realistic as possible in terms of the world of, you know, GT racing at the least, because there's so many cars to choose from, and we don't want it to be an Acura Cup, a McLaren Cup, a Ford Cup, whatever it might be. We want to try and have some variety out there as well.
And, you know, I've covered some GT3 and just sports car racing period, where even though there are so many different options in terms of what sort of cars these drivers can run, they always gravitate towards the same option. I mean, hey, they're racers. I totally get it. I spent 10 years in karts myself, and I know that when you want to try and get that competitive edge, you don't really care about there being diverse amounts of cars out there on the racetrack, as we had to take a look at some racing action a little bit farther in the back. That was heading off through turn number 4. A lot of the more challenging corners around this racetrack, if I do say so myself, but I feel like talking about the challenging turns around here is there's definitely some ammunition when it comes to that, because you've got a whole lot of trouble spots for these drivers to have their own difficulties with all throughout this. Just saw Brendan Herzing dealing with a GT4 Mercedes. They're not entirely sure who that was, but I will say the Pro-Am driver of Mark Ogier is the one right behind him in that number 34 McLaren. Just got that move done, but you can see how much that gap grew, albeit for a couple of moments. It's still rather big compared to what it once was, about 9/10 of a second between these racers as they head their way off through the final series of corners. Those lap traffic encounters, as much as you have those long straightaways that may make those encounters a bit easier compared to some other tracks, I still feel like mastering that GT4 overtaking game if you're a GT3 racer, and also getting some good rub of the green, getting some good luck when something like that goes down is going to be rather pivotal for those drivers in the GT3 classes.
So we're already seeing, Ron, this field start to spread a little bit now. Now, this is kind of the way of Indianapolis I've found personally, is eventually, once drivers are out of the tow range, it's so hard for them to break back down that gap that's been built up. So, for example, Herzing's out to a 1.3 gap over Mark Ogier. He's out of tow range. Mark has to now use his lap, or his ability to cut a fast lap time and actually catch Brennan based on his lap pace alone, not based on having the tow ahead of him. It's the same thing for Ryan Bajole onto Nathan Biggett at the front of the field. Now, he's kind of stayed with him. It's around about 1.4 seconds, so he's not let him run away just yet, but he has run away from Justin Bock a bit further back. That gap's now out to 4 seconds. So for Bock, he needs to get a wriggle on now, try and find some pace in this car, let the tyres get into their premium grip, and just get this thing forward as best you can. Because the problem is, if he continues to allow this 4-second gap to build up, he may eventually then find himself in the struggle zone of you're on your lonesome, you know, your mind starts to go a little bit, and then that's when mistakes can happen. He's got to try and keep focused, break down that gap, or at least hope that Ryan catches up to Nathan and they start battling, because otherwise that's going to become a real tough situation for him, especially with, you know, Ruiz in behind, who is of a lower class, but behind Ruiz is, you know, cars for position in terms of Shelby Hoff, David Steiner, David Gallant, even Stephen Smith a bit further back too. So he's got to try and traverse this traffic well and try and break down that gap ahead of him.
Yeah, at this point of the race, you know, you can win it on lap 1, but you certainly can lose it. And you can win one of these races here in the first 10 minutes, but you certainly can lose it. You know, one thing that I always like to say when it comes to these long races, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. But if you snap your ankle on the first step, that's not going to bode well for the rest of the journey. So these drivers want to get off to as smooth of a start as possible. They don't need to set the world on fire and come out there to the marching to the beat of their own drum and just saying, hey, look at me. They just need to come out here at the start of this race, negotiate the opening stages clean. Then when we get towards the end, when all the drama that we expect from a race like this is fully settled and we have a good idea as to who's going to be battling for what, that will be when these drivers really should probably turn up the wick a little bit and start to battle hard. I will say, though, these lap traffic encounters are not making this any easier for these racers, as we saw that Hornet's nest of cars battle their way off into turn number 1.
Yeah, you know, this is now where the struggle begins, isn't it? You know, it's for anyone out there who's done an endurance race before with multiple classes and you're in the top classification, at least of car type, dealing with this lap traffic is one of the more difficult aspects of this sort of racing. And I think, you know, one thing that lower class drivers can definitely learn is how do you best keep yourself predictable, because that's the main thing, is you need to stay predictable for the faster class of car to try and come past you. Now, obviously, we just saw then Justin Bock just kind of shoved it up the inside of the Merc there. But, you know, sticking to your racing line, you know, that's how you best keep yourself predictable. And then for the top class cars, have some patience. You're in a faster class of car, you're going to get past them. It's not like they're going to hold you up. Now, if they're blocking you, that's a different story, and that's a story for the stewards, if there are some in the session. But in terms of trying to get past them, if you're in a higher class car run, keeping yourself patient, you know you're going to get by them. If it means you have to give up a second or so, that's better than giving up, you know, 2 or 3 minutes in the pit lane because you're trying to fix your car, or you're needing a tow, so then you lose a lap. So patience can go a long way in that factor. It can get you a top 5 after starting last in an endurance race. So, you know, just having that patience is going to pay off for you. So I think at this stage, especially now, because the first 10 minutes or the first 10 to 15 minutes is normally the most chaotic in terms of a race. The first 10, the last 10, that's when it's really on edge. It's that middle portion where we get into that sort of lull period where drivers are just trying to traverse laps, they're trying to make up positions. It's very easy to get ahead of yourself and to make mistakes during this period. So keeping yourself consistent now across the next sort of 40 minutes or so through the pit stop, that's going to be important here. And I mean, did Shelby have to go for it around the outside then? I don't particularly think so, because that could have ended so poorly if the BMW then of Edward Delano didn't just kind of stick to the middle of the road. If he didn't have his wits about him then, that could have ended so much worse than what it did. You know, sometimes we talk about things and we get good examples of that. And I find that people learn best when you're talking about it, but you also have a visual representation at the same time. And that nearly became that. So, but I mean, this is the toughest part of the race now, keeping yourself clean and trying to push on forward. But Shelby is aggressive at this stage.
Yeah, at the moment, Shelby Howe and Christian Ruiz really starting to scrap up for a spot. This will be for P4 overall in this race. Well done thus far to the number 14, the Pro-Am racer of Christian Ruiz, your current leader in that Pro-Am GT3 category, holding on to an 8.3, 8.4, 8.5 second lead at that as well. So rather dominating performance, and now would probably be the time to say that I probably just hit him with the worst commentator jinx in my first here on MotorMouth Broadcasting. If you're enjoying this broadcast here, how about hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the racing action. Oh no! Contact being made as they head their way out of the inner field section yet again. Deja vu to one lap ago. Another ballsy move like that. They head their way up onto the banking. They're not going to be side by side. They head their way down into turn number 12, but the elbows really getting broken out. I think it all started with a lap car checking those racers up as they headed their way out of turn number 10, and disaster breaking out for those two racers. Unfortunate moment for sure, but that could have ended so much worse than it already did. But you brought up a good point, Hamish, talking about the way that you have to tackle a section of race like this. You know, I like to bring this up every now and then in the broadcast I'm doing, especially when it comes to a multi-class GT race. I used to do some race control. Oh no, that's a spinner heading off into turn number 1.
That was Justin
boy,
Block,
that's a big
P3.
moment for him.
Massive moment, not just for him, but for the classification of this race. He was P3. He went to go up the inside of the Porsche. Kind of just went through a little bit too hot. Rear tires go round. So, I mean, it's sad to say it. It's a typical mid-engine moment there. I think just a bit too much pace through turn 1, and the car did not agree with the move. And again, did he necessarily need to do it right there at turn 1, or could he have gotten away with a bit more patience? He had good gap in behind him. He could have just held off, waited, and gone around the outside at turn 4. He didn't do that, and that's now cost him. And Shelby Hoff, who we know has been pushing hard here through turn 10, has now dropped positions as well, as he's tried to send it on the outside of another GT4 car, and he's now dropped outside the top 5 of the GT3s and outside the top 5 of the GT3 Pro Class as well.
You know, sometimes you hear the saying, third time's the charm. I think in a situation like that, it was really third time's the crash. So let's take a look at this moment. As you can see, that GT4 traffic heading off to the mid-sector of this track could be so frustrating if you're stuck behind a GT4 car for such a long time. I could tell that was not going to work there. 3-wide action as well. Running a little bit wide off into the other grass and the dirt onto the curb, coming out of the turn. And look at that BMW wheeling it on the inside, trying to negotiate that GT4 traffic. You know, I was going to mention this before we saw that spin a couple of moments ago for Brock, who's now dropped down to 7th. Heartbreaking mistake to have here in the first 15 minutes of this race. But I used to do race control for a rather big multi-class GT series here on iRacing, and something that we would always stress in race control was a point that you raised not terribly long ago, Hamish, talking about how you find yourself in a situation, oh, look at that, that's a dive from a GT3 BMW. That's not going to work too well. I thought it did actually work out well down to turn at number 7. Holy cow, these drivers going for some outrageous sense, if I do say so myself. But no, I was going to say the fact that in race control, we would always urge these racers, hey, you're better off losing a second every now and then than spending 2.5 minutes having to tow back to pit lane and then spending another minute down pit lane where we inevitably slap you with a drive-through penalty. So there were so many times where an incident could be avoided by just a driver just being patient. But teaching patience to a racing driver, that's not usually going to end well. Again, I spent enough time in karts, and I've been around enough when it comes to racing to know the fact that racing drivers will always be the ones to push the limits, and they're also probably the people in sports that are most affected by peer pressure. As we take a look at a moment that happened in the GT4s, maybe around a bowling down to the turn. That's the 24 of Aiden Kiley with the moment down to turn number 7. Thankfully didn't collect any more cars as that GT4 Aston Martin spun through the turn, but a big moment to have to be sure off to the midsection of this track. Oh, as that's another spin. That's the 96 spinning around. That's heading off into turn number 12, I believe. Is that turn 12? Actually, yes, it is turn number 12. I got confused. I didn't know whether that was turn 12 or turn 1.
Yeah, it was just, looks like turn 1 to me.
It is turn 1.
that was Brennan.
My eyes doing me wrong.
Brennan Herzing, I blame the track designers, to be honest with you, wrong. I blame them for taking out the section of the oval as the last corner, because that would save us so much. Oh, it just gave way. Surely, surely that wasn't netcode. Surely
not. If that was netcode, that had to have been such an extreme form of netcode. I'd have to wonder whether or not one of these drivers' internet connection is just a hamster running on a wheel.
I mean, there's a bus between them. No, he's just gone. He went way too quick, and the rear just slipped up. So it's an unfortunate mistake from Brendan Herzig, but he now sits P16 overall, P5 in class. Nathan Biggett still showing pure dominance at the moment, but Ryan Bajole is trying to catch up to him. As David Gallant, the V-power was a little bit too much through turn 1. It appears it's another mid-engine moment at turn 1. More and more drivers losing it down there, as we're seeing, Ron. We've already seen... That's not the angle I wanted. I want this one. Thank you. Yeah, it's just, again, too much pace through there. We've already seen a McLaren, a Corvette, and now an Acura go round through turn 1. Just by carrying that little bit too much speed and the rear end not wanting to grip up.
Yeah, turn 1 is seeming to be a trouble spot for these mid-engine race cars. You know, I was thinking it's very, very small that it's really affecting you too much through there. But the banking that you have on the straightaways here, there is a little bit of it, I believe, here at Indy. Not a whole lot, just some. But that could potentially make a difference going from the banking onto the flat infield section. Maybe a change in the asphalt as well. That or these cars just do not like these racers one bit here tonight. As that's another spinner. Beautiful as we pan that camera over and see that McLaren spun down to turn number 12. Let's take a look at that. Oh, I think he had some assistance there. That's Chris Franz in the number 33 car. And yeah, contact being made as they had their way off into the braking zone. Look at that. It was nearly a McLaren on McLaren crime down to turn 12. That GT3 nearly clobbered into the stop GT4.
And I think that, I mean, now's the time, I think, Ron, to be brutally honest. Arguably, I mean, you've been in race control before, I've been in race control before. That's Chris's fault. He's going too cautiously, trying to let another car pass him. And it's led to contact. Like, we mentioned being patient and being predictable. Chris was not being predictable then. And it's going to come off as maybe somewhat controversial, but he should have just kept going. And he should have either, if you're going to let him pass into a corner, brake a whole lot earlier than that. Because why are you trying to run up the inside of him if you're letting him go? It doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense to me. But, you know, I'm a commentator, not a driver. So what would I know?
Hey, as I've said many, many times on many, many broadcasts I've done in the past, there's a very good reason why I'm behind the microphone instead of behind the wheel anymore. Primarily down to back pain, but, you know, that's neither here nor there.
Mine's primarily due to I do not have space for my rig, so I, you know, had to find some way of using my iRacing account. As I think that was Gerardo Camalinga, who is really struggling in the GT3 class tonight. I mean, he's having such a struggle. He's actually behind the majority of the GT4 field. So I have a feeling that Gerardo may have made a mistake picking the McLaren. Because unfortunately, one thing we found out through all of our great chats out there tonight, which we will give a quick shout out to, driver 67's claiming that he was a rookie last race, but now he's ranked as an AM. Is that a mistake? I'm going off the list that I was given, but we can always make adjustments. Nick in the chat as well, giving love to Queethro as well. MJ out there giving love to Dave Steiner. Of course, the Australian out there, so I'm always happy to see David trying to go for a podium, personally for me. And then we've also got Wiener Boy 3 out there as well, giving love to number 13. Just giving love to the 666 as well. And then Stumble saying, after this race, Ron, the car they're in is the car they will be staying in for the rest of the season. So if you're a driver and you're in a mid-engine car, and currently the mid-engine cars have not been the best in terms of the meta on iRacing, it's been the front-engine cars that have been the best in terms of the Merc, the Mustang, and the BMW. you may be just a little bit worried if the BOP is going to stay the same heading into Spa as it was for Watkins Glen. Because for the rest of this season, if you're stuck in a mid-engine car, you may be stuck in something that's less than desirable going forward.
Yeah, you know, when I think of the ever-changing dynamic in the GT3s here on the iRacing platform, I remember earlier on this year, probably down to the fact that it had just been introduced and was just insanely quick. The Acura, I remember that car being an absolutely indomitable force, and even through BOP, felt like an unstoppable force. Now, though, you can see that dynamic start to shift season after season, and even midway through this season as well, as they shift the BOP from time to time. It looks like the front engine is the name of the game. So that's the reason why I'm a bit more of an open-wheel driver personally. One, I am absolutely terrible behind the wheel of a sports car. You should see me in a GT3. It's not nearly as bad as me figure skating, but still not great. But it's also, like, if you want to remain competitive, you have to go from, okay, let's just think of the cars that have been quick all throughout this iRacing season, or just the past year on iRacing. You probably would have bounced between the McLaren, the BMW, the Mustang, and the Acura, and that's just the four. I've seen people run Porsches very well. I was covering a GT3 series earlier on this year, in fact, and the only driver who could contend with the Acuras was somebody in a Porsche. Now, I drive the Porsche personally, and maybe it's just skill error. It definitely is skill error with me behind the wheel, but that Porsche is a very setup dependent car. So to be competitive in a GT3 series, if you're running like big on iRacing as well, you basically need to have the lot of them, which, I don't know, maybe it's down to the fact that I barely make enough money to afford Greek yogurt, let alone an entire selection of iRacing cars. I feel like that's a bit too much to chew off with the BOP, but hey, that's why we love GT3 racing. You can never really pin down what car is going to be the quickest at any given point in a year unless you see that BOP ahead of time.
So what I'm getting from this, Ron, is you are a spectacular ice skater, because the Porsche is known for 10 out of 10 triple pirouettes.
Yeah. Oh, man. Here's a fun little story. The first time I've ever shared a story on one of these broadcasts here on MotorMouth Broadcasting, my only experience ice skating in my entire life was went down to this place, which was as we have the pit stops going on here with the BMW. See, that's usually how it goes. I try and share a story, and then something happens out there on the racetrack. So I'm waiting an asteroid to come down on the runoff area of Turn 1. But first and only time I've ever gone ice skating my entire life. Went there with my mother and my father when I think I was about 6 years old. The entire building was branded with Flyers logos, which it's the city of Philadelphia. It can't be too much of a shock. And based off the fact that the Flyers haven't won anything since 1975, you can imagine that figure skating and ice skating event went absolutely fantastically. I went there having never been on ice before. I left being on ice and also having my mother with a broken ankle. So, yeah, being good on ice doesn't really run well in the family, I guess.
Maybe you just need to stick to beaches and surfing instead. Stick to melted instead of frozen, possibly.
Yeah, I think that may be a good idea for me moving forward.
Well, you know, they often, I mean, it also depends, though, like what kind of ice skates you were wearing, because figure skating skates are the worst to try and learn how to ice skate. The best are actually hockey skates, because they're much more forgiving in terms of learning, but that's also coming from someone who lives in a country where we do not have snow unless you live on an island that's just south of the country. So it's very rare that we get enough snow that you could go skiing unless you go to, you know, a place in what is called the high country, where it's high towards the clouds, so you're very likely going to get snow during the winter. Aside from that, it's just rain and wet. So Shelby Hoff, David Gallant into pit lane as well. Nathan Biggett currently leads the way just before the halfway mark of this race. 27 minutes 45 seconds done in round number 3 thus far. He set the fastest lap of the race, not the last lap by, but the lap before, 124.79. The last lap he set was a 124.83. Just to give you a comparison between him and Ryan Bajole, fastest lap from Ryan, a 124.84. So Nathan is on the pace, and the Mustang is looking to go 3 and zip at Indianapolis.
And what a way to do it as well. The All-American track with the All-American car doing well here. It would just feel fitting to see that Mustang come to victory lane, but there's still a whole lot of racing action between now and the end. Not even at the halfway mark. We're certainly getting up to it. We will be exactly at that halfway mark in 1.5 minutes time. So I think that was a big slide from the number 13 car that you saw heading his way through the final turn. That final turn here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course on this configuration, at least, I would say was even more treacherous than the one that people were blowing tires on back in 2005. So I have never really been able to get that section well, and then you hit the bump going from the flat infield into the banked bit of turn number 1 that you still drive a little bit through. I mean, it's not completely flat when those drivers get spat back out onto that start-finish straightaway. That bump is enough to shatter your spine in the sim, let alone in real life. And just imagine trying to handle any sort of sideways snaps you have through there. Holy cow, that is super tough. All these drivers, though, just about everybody making that call to come down pit lane. It started off as a slow trickle. I would best compare it as a broken faucet. Now, however, we have a torrential flood of drivers making that call to pits.
Yeah, race leader Nathan Biggett, who's had no draft train this whole race, has managed to go a lap longer than those other cars. Now, they may be attempting to go for an undercut here. I think if you're at the front, though, is it necessarily worth trying to go for an undercut? You're going to end up in traffic. I suppose if you think, well, Nathan's going to catch the GT4 traffic, possibly some more GT3 traffic as well, that may hold him up. So for Ryan Bajole, he may not be out of the woods just yet in terms of not challenging for the race lead, but it's going to depend how well Nathan can traverse this lap traffic here as he comes up towards turn 1. It's a massive send on the BMW into turn 1. Job done there for Nathan Biggett. He now continues on with some GT4 traffic ahead of him, but he was not willing to wait. He wanted the spot over the BMW there of Stephen Smith. As who was that? That was Christian Ruiz, the previous race leader of the Pro-Am class, going off down there. Cold tyres. And that has cost him again here this evening.
And you could see that close calls. They headed their way through the chicane. It's still side-by-side racing as they head their way down the backstretch, down Holman Boulevard into turn at number 7. Works out well for those two. They finally get it single-filed out. But that was a very bad commentator's jinx for me. I apologize to Mr. Ruiz for it. I'll take a look at the moment for that number 14 car. He came out of the pit, so cold tires definitely potentially had a role in deciding what happened here. He just loses it on the exit of turn number 3. Very odd section to see a driver lose it, but very lucky though. The fact he was able to get that course somewhat wound up, still wasn't to a complete standstill, but just got slowed down enough whereby he could avoid those tire barriers on the outside. We see Biggert come down pit lane here, so that is your race leader overall making that call to pit. Was just going to say though, very lucky that we saw Ruiz avoid those tire bundles, because in the sim, they're basically made out of the matter of a white dwarf star.
So Ryan Bajole at the moment is currently up underneath the Verizon sign in the infield, about halfway around the circuit. He had about 1 minute and 2 seconds gap up to Nathan Biggett in the race lead after the pit stop period. So he's going to have to try and push this car to its maximum now through these next couple of corners. What I noticed there at that moment there with Ruiz was, well, A, he hasn't actually given up the race lead of the Pro-Am class, and then B, it looks like he came in for an early apex, then it went out again to try and turn it back in, and the car just didn't want to grip as he went through. He kind of misweighted the car through that corner, and then that's what's caused him to go off track on the cold tyres, because they don't want to grip up. So I think maybe a mistake by Christian not to change the driving style now that the car has fuel back in it and it's cold tyres. Might have just been attacking it the way he was with the lighter fuel and the warmer, more grippy tyres that he had prior to the pit stop, and that seems to have cost him. And that's one of the things that drivers need to recall when they're making pit stops, is you have to then reset your driving style to how it was prior, well, pretty much back at the start of the race when you were full fuel and with those fresh tyres again. It's a bit hard to do when you've been driving for half an hour and you've been getting into that rhythm, especially around here because it's a very rhythmic, heavy track, and if you break that to try and change your driving style, more mistakes can happen as well. So it's a tough balancing act for that, Ron.
Yeah, I'd say you bring up a good point in reference to keeping the momentum rolling for yourself around this track. This is one of those tracks where if you can get into that groove and just stick with it, you'll be good. It's like a slot car. If you can stay, oh, look at that, the dive heading down into turn number 10. It's a McLaren on McLaren battles. They head their way out of the section. This has got to be super, super intense. That's, I believe, a battle actually involving a lap car, but regardless, holy cow, that's some incredible stuff as they headed their way off through that section of the track. The dive, the absolute send from the 8 of Ryan Bajoli. That has to be, I would say that is very brave as they headed their way off through that section of the racetrack. Turn 10, strangely enough, seeing a lot of McLaren-related drama heading off through that section of the racetrack. Not sure if there's something in the air through there or what the deal is, but regardless, I was going to get back to the point that I was mentioning. This track is one where if you stay in the swing of things, if you stay in that momentum, if you stay in the same frame of mind, you're going to be good. If not, if you get thrown off your game a little bit running around here, you're really going to start to see those mistakes begin to pile up. You know, it's like you like miss one apex, or you like lock up the brakes heading down into turn number 1. This track has multiple of just about everything. So if you make one mistake heading off through one section of the racetrack, your confidence is definitely going to take a hit as you head your way off through everywhere else on this circuit.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much pressure and how much the mentality cracks once you've made that first mistake, and eventually more and more begin to come. And if you don't try and keep your mind clear and keep yourself, just focused after a mistake like that, the domino effect is absolutely massive, because it might not happen straight away, but eventually you'll make a second, and a little bit less time you make a third, a little bit less time you make a fourth, and then a fifth, and then sixth, and it'll just go on and on and on. As Gallant is getting very aggressive there with Christian Richard. He has just, I mean, he's just served him. He served him off the road down there. And I mean, to me, that's not how you go motor racing. That is not how you go motor racing there from David Gallant. That was way too aggressive. I mean, he's just served him off track.
Yeah, no, that was iffy in my book, and you see the damage on that car. I mean, the front bumper is completely cooked on the number 61 car, and I don't think he was the only driver that had a piece of that action. Look at the Mustang a little bit farther in the back of shot, got involved in this incident as well. You can see that dive down to the turn. I can understand breaking the elbows happen. That is just absolutely unnecessary. And the contact being made, that right there was the 10 spinning off the track in dramatic fashion. So very unfortunate for that moment to have happened down into the turn. I believe that was Jed Calderman. So one of the other top running drivers a little bit earlier on in GT3 Pro-Am got to get taken out of this race. As a result of that drama, I believe he's towed back to pit lane. Probably a lot of rear suspension damage on that race car. I mean, this is my first ever time covering this series, and my first time on one of these broadcasts, but based off the fact I've done like 210 shows up to this point in the year, I feel like I'm qualified enough to say that that was not a very smart move down to turn 7, at least in my book. Again, very good reason why I'm behind the microphone and set behind.
No, I mean, he wasn't even far enough up on him. He was barely up on him there. Tristan has the right to the corner at that point. He's the leading car. David has not passed safely, and that's the base of it. He served him through that corner, pushed him out, he basically just pushed him out of the way and forced him into the dirty stuff on the outside. That's then causing a turnaround, and it's taken Jed Cotterman with him, who was just a innocent bystander. So, for my money, I mean, if I was in race control, David would have a drive-through every day of the week, because it's way too aggressive, especially at this point of the race. I mean, are you going to win it this lap? No, you're not. We're 37 and a half minutes in, Ron. He still had 23. He still had 23 minutes to go. Did not need to do it that aggressively. He could have been more patient. Sometimes drivers need to take. I think some drivers more or less either need to get their RN or their MD just so they can be a bit more patient out there.
And another thing not really helping that case down to turn number 7 is how much this racetrack bottlenecks heading off through this turn. You could see it's rather okay off through there. And then you have the apex curb, which is very far away from the infield grass. You can tell that was a change that was made a little bit later on in the rather checkered history of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, all the way back in the year 2000 for Formula One. I've had a couple of changes, and that turn is certainly one. You can see that inside curb there, and the other curb that these drivers are actually driving around takes a big chunk of the racing surface. So going side by side, heading off through that section of the racetrack is super tough. That bottlenecks so hard that you're playing with fire going side by side through that section of the racetrack. But one thing I do want to raise as we are following the driver who's at the epicenter of all of that, Tristan Richard, who's the innocent bystander, got punted into a spin as now missing a front bumper. The sun is coming down here and the lights are coming on, but because of that incident, Tristan Richards' bumper is not on his car. It's on the side of the road. It's probably in the hands of one of the track marshals who's probably put that bumper for sale on eBay by now. So those headlights that were on his race car are doing him no favors at the present moment.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, he's going to have to give up the 1 minute to traverse through pit lane and fix the front end of that car. So if he's got a fast repair available, he needs to use it as best he can. And actually was that, I thought he just ran it way wide then. I thought I just saw a car exit stage left. But no. So we'll see. Carlos Ruiz, though, in the chat with us here tonight as well. Giving some love to Christian, who I'm going to say is probably his brother. He's new to iRacing and making old man Clodden slow. Well, Christian is only 80 iRating away from getting himself classified as a pro car. He's on 1523. You need to be 1600 or above to be a pro car. And that's one thing that I wonder is, do they get reclassified if they've done officials mid-season and they get above 1600 run? I mean, surely that would be the fairest way to do it, because if as soon as you hit 1600, you should be a pro car because you fit the criteria at that point.
I was never very good at making decisions.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, is it fair to Pro-Am cars that someone who would be, if it was the start of the season, they'd be classified as a pro? Would it be considered fair to them then if you all of a sudden you're in the position where you'd be classified as a pro, but you remain in Pro-Am? I suppose you'd lose Pro-Am drivers if that happened, but I don't know.
I would say maybe running it based off the performance of that driver. Another series I commentate here on the iRacing platform. There's they basically organize it where there's 3 classes. One's for drivers that are 60 years and older, the Masters category as they call it. And then there's 2 more classes that they have where the limit of entry for the top class is, I think it's 3,000 or 3,500 iRating. There have been drivers who reach that and go into that class who are just incredibly slow. I say this knowing fully well the 2 drivers that I am indirectly referencing. One of them is the series admin of that particular series, and the other is the gentleman who's at the helm of the broadcasting company that covers them, that I do this broadcast with. But they ended up struggling in the top class. Then in the bottom class, they do pretty all right, even though they break that iRating. I think iRating, at the end of the day, it is a good metric here in the sim. I don't want this discount iRacing and the wonderful work they do behind the scenes, mainly because the last time I ended up making a joke about something to do with iRacing and specifically the weather system, how the weather forecasts in sim were about as accurate as they are in real life. Last time I made a joke of that nature, my iRacing didn't really work well for me for the next 3 weeks. So I'm not going to say the iRating system is bad, but I feel like the on-track performance should probably get taken into consideration more than the iRating. Hey, they say it about age, and I think it can be said about iRating. It's just a number.
Yeah, I think if you're a series admin and you're in the position, do pre-qualifying, and if they're drivers that have previously raced, take into consideration how well they've raced in the series, because it's exactly right, Ron. I mean, iRating's not necessarily reflective of a driver's ability. sometimes drivers get into bad luck in officials and it drops their I rating. That's not very reflective of their skill level. So I think, yeah, I think if you're in the position to organise a week of pre-qualifying, compare that then to your previous season results, and that should give you a good indication of where drivers should sit in terms of the totem pole. That was a very late dive from John Voigt trying to sneak past Daniel Nans for the podium position of the GT4 AMS class at this stage. To give everyone an update on where these drivers sit in terms of classifications for the classes. Well, currently the class leaders, Biggett leads the GT3 Pro, Ruiz leads GT3 Pro Am, Campbell the GT4 Am class, and then Sierra leads the GT4 Rookie class as well. And then to give you the reflective SOS, or GT3 Pro is about 2.2k, Pro Am 1.3k, Am at 1.7k, and then the Rookie class 0.8, 800 I rating is the current SOS for that one as well. Then to compare your best lap times, well, the GT3 Pro field, the race leader's done a 124.7. Pro-Am class, a 125.2 is the fastest in that one, 131.2 for the AM class, 133.048. So I think it's pretty well reflective, Ron, on who is, majority of drivers are in the correct class. And I don't think there's any that have been misclassified, mind you. But I think, these drivers have done a very good job. And for John Voigt and Daniel Nans, these guys are still battling away for P3 in class at the moment. Carlos Sierra, though, who we haven't really shown off too much, has been doing very well in the GT4 rookie class at this stage. He's trying to deal with the lap traffic at the moment as the sun comes down. Hopefully, it's more or less just the moonlight shining on his possible race win here tonight at Indianapolis.
Yeah, the sun is coming down. The time is slowly but surely running out here in round number 3 of the High Point Racing GT Challenge here at Indianapolis. 15 minutes now, less than 15 on the clock. The sun dipping ever slowly but surely below that horizon. Currently working out to be, I believe it'd be about 8:18 in sim time, 8:18 p.m., 8:19 p.m., around about that same area. But in terms of the track temperatures as well, still rather perfect in both the track and the ambient temperatures. 76 degrees Fahrenheit, the current ambient temperature, and track temperatures around 78. So looking pretty all right when it comes to these tires. Not having to worry about overheating them too much, which can be a worry at this track because you don't have any sort of banking to help you out. I mean, it is a road oval, but really the banking on a road course really hurts the tires more than it really helps their speed. So you don't have to worry about the tires getting pummeled too much, and plus with the favorable track conditions, it's pretty alright, even though some of these GT3 drivers still going for some rather wild sends on some of the GT4 competitors around this racetrack. They're still running their own at the present moment, and the tires are not screaming in agony just yet.
No, they're doing, the tires are doing quite well, and I think for the race leader, especially Nathan Biggett, who went that little bit longer on his stint, he'll have the better tyres comparatively to cars behind him. In fact, he's built up that gap now to 9 seconds in the race lead. So it's looking more and more likely, not to call the cart before the horse here, more and more likely that Mustang is going to go 3-0 this season and have a perfect run at the championship here. For Carlos Sierra, his next closest rival in terms of in-class position is Christopher Coy, who is 18 seconds behind Carlos at this stage. He's then got 13 seconds back to Aidan Kiley at the moment, then a further 50 seconds back to Liam Habul, who's been very vocal in our chat the last few weeks. He's out on track right now. And yeah, he's still on the lead lap, to be fair to him, so he's doing well to stay on the lead lap, but it won't be long until Sierra does get past him. Lance Campbell at the moment is doing a great job in the GT4 AM class, 17.6 seconds ahead of Wesley Straight at this stage. Daniel Nans and John Voigt are continuing their battle here, Ron, but they are chasing down Wesley at this stage, and this could become a little three-way battle for P2, which we've seen in the first 2 rounds of the season, and it looks to be the same, or at least similar scenario tonight. Just cherry-picked a couple of different drivers for you this week, just to make it a bit special.
Yeah, for some of these drivers, there will certainly be a special evening at the end of this race. If they could seal the deal and get their respective wins, they will be feeling quite happy about themselves in a race that has certainly seen its points of dramas. We see a BMW GT4 car run a little bit deep down into turn number 1.
That was Nans. That cost him P3 in class to John Voigt, who's just come past him.
Oh, and that is a very costly mistake for sure for the driver of the number 95 car. Simple mistake to make, though, down to turn number 1. So you can see these racers really starting to squabble up, heading off through that chicane. A very clunky chicane at that. The turn 5 and 6 section here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course being rather synonymous as a section where these drivers can absolutely take flight. As we can see some drama as they come out of turn number 10, nearly seeing a car end up all the way hitting the outside wall of turn number 2 on the oval. That, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, is the number 75 of Liam Hubble. Yeah, you can see him in that high point racing car. That was a wild off-track excursion.
Yeah, it was. Obviously, the spin of Justin Bock, whose night has just gone from bad to worse, then caused one of the other GT4 cars to take evasive action and just doored Liam Hubble off the road. So not Liam's fault there. That was wrong place, wrong time, unfortunately for him. It has now cost him or at least staying on the lead lap to Carlos Sierra within that rookie class. But yeah, at least the car's not too broken as Clodden and is starting to build up that nice lead. Now Ruiz has now gone past Bock. Bock is going slow. So this car is not healthy, it seems, Ron. He's been in the strife already here tonight and it looks to only be getting worse and worse as the race goes on. It's now allowed Todd Beyer past him. But Ruiz and Clodden look to continue their battle, although Kenneth Clodden is off the road and out of the race lead for the GT3 Pro-Am class. A mistake once again down at turn 7, and a McLaren is off the road once again down there. And that's a big loss of position there for Kenneth and could have very well cost him the race win for that class with only 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, that was a costly mistake as he heads his way out of turn number 7. The 206 of Claudin gonna drop down like a rock as a result of that drama. I was just going to note that the reason why we may see some of these drivers start to take it a little bit easy, you have to consider the incident limits here. It's been a hectic and a dramatic race for some of these drivers, and at 17x being the limit until these drivers pick up a drive-through penalty, we may end up seeing these racers take it a bit easy. A simple mistake as he heads his way out of turn number 7. It wasn't even really contact or anything of the sorts. They just lit up the tires running over the curb there, the serrated curb on the exit, maybe running off into the paint and the grass, but either way, a very costly mistake for your at one point GT3 Pro-Am leader of Cloden, as I think there may have been some drama involving our GT4 Am leader of Campbell, as he blinked out of the session entirely. There may have been a UFO abduction that took place.
Yeah, he's gone. I've not seen him rejoin, which is now, oh, he's back now. Oh my God, because that nearly gave Wesley Straight the race lead in the dying embers here. Around about 8.5 minutes to go. The hope now for Wesley is that Lance gets the ping flag and he's sent back to pit lane. That is the hope for Wesley Straight. That's the only way he's ever going to get the race winning class, or Lance makes a mistake. So it was possible that he could have claimed it then. He wasn't quite lucky enough. At least Wesley was, but Lance needs to go buy a lotto ticket because he may have just had his race win saved for him. Nathan Biggert, though, pure dominance at this stage, 7 or about 8 seconds. Back to Ryan Bajole here, Ron, and for 21 seconds as he's just sent Daniel Nance, who was P4 in the GT4 AM class, off the road down at turn number 10. And I know we're 8 minutes to go, but surely patience is still a virtue here, Ron.
And you can see that send down into the turn. Man, these GT3 racers are seeing the red mist. You know, I talked about this a little bit earlier on during the broadcast. A contact being made on a very sketchy rejoin, I gotta say. Not completely innocent there is the number 95 of Nams. But, you know, I mentioned this a little bit earlier on in the show, how if you're a GT3 racer and you get stuck behind a GT4 car running from turn number 1 all the way through down into the time you finally build up a bit of speed, either into turn 7 or even through that section right at the end of the infield, all the way through to turn 10 where we saw that contact go on, you can start to see these racers and their patience begin to snap. And I think that's exactly what we saw there from the number 8 of Bajoli. I'm a bit iffy on that move personally. I think that was just too late of a send. There's so much you can do as a GT4 car. I always said this when I was doing that race control stuff that I mentioned earlier on. The game of having clean lap traffic encounters, it is a game that needs to be played by both the GT4 drivers by making themselves predictable and trying to get out of harm's way whenever they can, and the GT3 drivers for not going for absolutely insane sends. That was definitely a bit marginal from the 8. I'm sure he's not going to feel too happy about that, but at this point in time, he's probably a little bit frustrated with how things have gone at the moment. Looks like he's going to finish at P2 as another mistake down to the second to last corner, I should say, running wide through turn 13.
Yeah, it's, the race is getting into its dying embers. I mean, 6 minutes to go. It's 10 seconds, the gap between Bajoli and Bigot. You then have to ask the question, Ron, why is he pushing so hard to break it down? Like, does he really think he can break down a 10-second gap to the race leader? I don't think so. I don't think if I was in that position I could. I think it's more or less you then just have to consolidate, take home the P2 points. Why push so hard as Liam Habul has just had contact with Gerardo Camalinga, who's been in the wars all day with himself. How has this happened to Gerardo? So he already had an initial off-track down at turn 13 where I think he's just run it wide, possibly he has. But then it continues on. And he's up on Liam Habul. So he goes to turn in. Okay, well, why is Liam trying to go back up the inside of him?
You know what? That is the yin with the yang. As much as we just had the yang of the GT3 driver wiping out a GT4, just had a GT4 wipe out a GT3 there. That was not the... Yeah, that...
He doesn't think he's going to be
just
there.
Messy.
Yeah, I think there is part to play. He shouldn't have just turned in like that, expecting him not to be there. But Liam could have made it a whole lot easier for him. He did not need to try and come back at him up the inside. You're in a completely different class. Wasn't worth it. Was not worth it. So, I think maybe some of the drivers just need to put the thinking caps on, do some self-reflection before next week, and just think to themselves, when is it worth me going for the move and when is it not? Because it will save you in the long run. I think both had a part to play on that one there, Carlos. He definitely turned in, but I don't think Liam should have tried to come back up the inside of him there. I think that was... They both had a part to play. It's probably a racing incident, but they both had a part to play, I think.
Yeah, just super unfortunate for both of those drivers to have a moment like that down into the turn, because neither of them got away with it completely scot-free. Some damage, some incident points, and losing a bit of time as well. We are getting to crunch time, though, in this race with less than 4 minutes to go on the clock in this 1 hour race here for round number 3 of the High Point Racing GT Challenge here on MotorMouth Broadcasting. If you have enjoyed the show up to this point, how about you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on the racing action throughout the rest of the season here and the rest of the stuff that we've got here on MMB. We have got some great racing actions to look forward to pretty much every single week here, so it gives you a very good reason to tune into it. But certainly getting to crunch time, certainly getting to the end stage for the 01 of Nathan Biggert, on track for his 3rd win in 3 races thus far this season. That 01 Mustang has just been on rails tonight. Ever since he took that lead, he just has not looked back.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been the similar scenario the first 2 rounds as well, and you then have to start to ask the question of, well, when does he get challenged, and when does somebody try and challenge him for the race lead at some point, or the championship lead at some point? And at this stage, I mean, he's in the, one of the top 3 strongest cars at the moment. What's that Carlos claiming that? Oh, don't kick me now, please. Good, it's back. Kenneth Clodden has been dropping pace. We saw him make a mistake earlier. I think he's been making a couple of more here, Ron. And that may have just been leading to him maybe just cruising on home and trying to get some points here. Not necessarily pushing too hard. He has got the race leader right behind him. so you let him go. But yeah, I think for Kenneth Gladden, it's just trying to solidify the points finish that he's got and not give up too many more.
Yeah, just if you are struggling at this point of the race, just play damage control, and you won't be too happy with how it goes, but you won't be too upset either. If you're not on the attack, playing the good defensive game at the end of this race will certainly be a big determining factor in how well you do. It has definitely gone dark here in Indianapolis. The sun is firmly below that horizon. The lights are shining on these race cars. Those old yellow French headlights on these GT3 machines bearing their way around this track like small little marching ants with a tiny little flashlight on top of their head. They're running around this track with probably about 1 lap left to go for a race leader of Biggert next time he comes across the line. We follow him right now as he has his way down into, this is down into turn at number 7 right here. So he'll be coming to take the white flag next time by. And Complete was overall just been an incredibly dominant performance from him. Even at this point in the race, not too terribly far off his best lap of the race, only about a second slower, and frankly, he can afford to be in the cruising lane right now.
Yeah, he can. I mean, he's got plenty of time back to Ryan Pajoli, and the pressure's on Ryan now, and I think he's learnt that it's not worth him pushing too hard. The pressure's less off Nathan the further we get into these races, because he ends up building gap as he gets the white flag here, 1 to go. The pressure starts to then come off him, and then he can just cruise on home. And when you're in that position, it's one of the best, not only one of the best feelings, but it's one of the best positions you can be in as a driver, is being so far out in front that you can just cruise. The crucial thing, though, is making sure you do not get out of your rhythm. Because we often see, I mean, I think back to, I believe it was the NASCAR race in Mexico, SVG had such a lead that his engineer said, oh, you can probably lift off now. He didn't want to, though, because if he did, he might start making mistakes by actually not attacking the circuit how he'd gotten into attacking it. And that's also another factor in this type of race as well, is, well, when do you actually lift and how much of a percentage do you lift? Because you don't want to then lose that rhythm that you've gotten yourself into.
You know, whenever I think of a situation like that, I think of the 1991 Canadian Grand Prix when Nigel Mansell lost it right on the final lap because he was taking it easy. Took a little bit too easy at the end of it all. He ended up costing himself a win. Don't think that's going to happen, though, for Nathan Biggert as he heads his way down to turn number 13. It has been an extraordinary start to the season for the driver of that 01 Mustang as he heads his way through the final turn. Biggert going to lead from lights of flag, essentially, here at Indianapolis and take his 3rd victory of the season. There's a checkered flag for Biggert. He is victorious here at Indy. Just waiting for a few more cars to come across the line. Bajoli going to finish in P2 in the GT3 Pro category, 10 seconds back of your race winner. The next driver to come across the line here is going to be Shelby Howe in the number 11 car. This will be P3 in that GT3 Pro category, and that will be a very good performance for that driver as well. It's a McLaren at P2 and P3. Rather surprising considering how powerful those front-engine race cars have been all throughout tonight and how those rear to mid-engine cars have been about as ill handling as you could possibly get. But speaking of those front-engine cars, one of them has been rather dominant in GT3 Pro-Am all throughout tonight. Christian Ruiz in the number 14 car. That BMW has been up in the front more often than not in GT3 Pro-Am. He's coming down the pits, though. What's the deal here for the number 14? This may end up giving the actually, no, I think he has a big enough gap that he may be able to get this done. What's the deal here? Whether it's be some sort of penalty, I'm looking through. There's a black flag for Christian Ruiz. I don't think he's going to be able to serve that as much as he made that entrance into the pits. If that's a drive-through, I think this may actually be the Pro-Am win for Brandon Herzing in that number 96 Corvette as he heads his way down that start-finish stretch. It's going to be victory for him, I believe, in GT3 Pro-Am. What a dramatic turn of things, dramatic turn of events right at the end of this race. Should be noted GT4M, Lance Campbell, the Canadian, the number 20 2020 Aston Martin was able to grab the win in GT4 AM and in GT4 Rookie. Your victory at the end of it all ended up being the number 13 Aston Martin of Carlos Sierra. So the Aston's doing well in GT4, but drama right towards the end of this race in the GT3 Pro Am category. We'll have to wait for iRacing and our graphics to fully update. I believe, though, that would have to be victory for Brandon Herzing in that GT3 Pro-Am category. I don't think iRacing will let him get away with serving a black flag by driving through only about 2/3 of the pit lane.
No, it shouldn't. I think on the graphic it will say to us that Christian is the race winner, but when we go into the race results post, like leaving the session, it will classify Brandon Herzing as the winner because he hasn't technically completed the drive-through before the end of the race, so it's then got to give him a drive-through amount of penalty. It's not like an F1 where where Michael Schumacher was able to do a stop hold penalty prior to the race line because his pit stall was earlier than the start finish line at Old Silverstone. No. Christian has crossed the finish line in pit lane, and he's crossed the pit line. He's crossed the start finish line whilst he's in pit lane. So it's classified him as the win in SDK, but I don't think he is actually the race winner. I think it is going to be Brandon Herzing because it should give him a time penalty of probably about 20 or 30 seconds, which would cost him the win.
Yeah, I'm looking through right now the iRacing results. It has Christian Ruiz classed as P12 overall. That would put him in P3 of the other Pro-Am racers at the end of this. So Brandon Herzing is guaranteed essentially to be your Pro-Am winner at the end of this race. Brian Scott, though, well done to the driver of the number 46 car. Didn't really talk about him too much throughout that race. He's going to walk away with P2 in that Pro-Am GT3 class. But wow, what a dramatic turn at the end of this. As much as Nathan Biggert was able to grab that race victory in quite a comfortable fashion, and in GT4, it was a bit uncontested, must be said, between Lance Campbell at the end of that race in the AM GT4s and your rookie winner of Carlos Sierra. That GT3 Pro-Am category and the drama right towards the end of the race certainly made up for it.
Well, that there is as about about as much fireworks as you could ask for at the end of a race. I mean, we didn't realize he had copped the black flag. It has also been confirmed by Carlos in the chat too that Christian has been classified as P3. So it does mean the race winner is Brandon Herzing, as you said, Ron. We have got the race winner, though, Nathan Biggert, waiting to come and have a chat. He's about to catch up with Ron Mourns after his third win of the season and third win in a row.
Yeah, Nathan, welcome into the commentary booth, man. Congratulations on your third win of the season, their third win in a row, and a pretty dominant performance, it must be said, here at Indy. Happy to talk us through the race.
Yeah, it's been a great season so far. Really enjoyed the High Point guys inviting us over, have some fun with them. I love GT3 racing. It's a fun, great car, great series. I think it's probably the most popular on iRacing, and there's a reason for that, man. It's just fun to drive, fun to battle, and then you add the multi-class part into it. These GT4s out there, using patience, getting around them, trying not to cause them too much issue as you get around, but also trying to not lose too much time. It's just fun. I really enjoyed it. Tonight was just a great. Just got good luck. I wasn't comfortable with the Ford. The Mustang wasn't the greatest in practice. It took me quite a few laps to get to where I was comfortable. To push the car. Like, I was comfortable driving it around and not wrecking it, but to push and try to get real lap time out of it, it was real sketchy. With these new tire updates, it's fun. It's a challenge. But yeah, like I said, finally figured it out. Got the pole for qualifying, and basically it was just getting the start nailed down. We went 3 wide right off the drop of the green. Going into turn 1 is always crazy at Indy, but we all made it. We all gave room. It was able to pull away, and then from there it was making sure to save fuel to shorten up the stop. I was able to get an extra lap in, had a nice quick pit stop, and then after coming out, seen I had a lead, so I was able to just go easy from there, give a little more patience around the lap traffic, and just bring it home at the end. And even at the end, letting them guys battle for position, not trying to get in the middle of that and let them finish that up. So just a great dominant win. Really happy tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to be quite happy about this performance. 3 for 3, and we still got 9 races left to go, but that is a pretty convincing way to start off this season. Going to be running at the Red Bull Ring, though, in 1 week's time. Rather big departure from this racetrack. So I want to ask you about what your thoughts are heading into that race.
The biggest thing there for me is not getting a drive through for too many incidents. The Red Bull Ring, the speed is out there, but it's the off tracks, you're gonna rack them up, and I'm sure I'll be at the limit, if not over it, by the time the race is over. So try to do what I can to minimize mistakes there. And like I said, it's a different animal, it's a different track. This Ford Mustang, it's fast, but it's a handful to drive. That's why I chose it. I really enjoy a challenge, and I've never driven it actually at a Red Bull Ring, so it'll be new to me. But I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
Whenever I think of the Red Bull Ring, I think of just constant 1Xs of running over curbs a little bit too much or going off the track ever so slightly. I always mention it every single time I do a broadcast of the Red Bull Ring. First time I watched a full weekend of practice, qualifying, race, everything for a Formula One Grand Prix, Austrian Grand Prix weekend was in 2016, where I think everybody and their mother's cars all had their suspension give out on them. So I dread to see what sort of off tracks may happen in 1 week's time. But hey, just a part of the track, just a part of this racing. And it was absolutely fantastic here at Indy tonight. And Nathan, before we let you go and celebrate this win, is there anybody you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Yeah, absolutely. Give a shout out to Jed for inviting the Chop Shop guys over here. Shout out to them. My team is the Chop Shop. We're gonna do the spa this weekend. Really looking forward to that. They support me, hang out with me in Discord today. Just enjoy hanging out with them guys. So appreciate them. Motormouth for doing a broadcast. You guys do an amazing job. I'll give you that. The last 2 weeks, I go back and watch the races. Really enjoy it. The dynamic between the two guys. Just a shout out to you guys for doing an amazing job. And just the league itself, High Point, everybody involved, all the drivers tonight doing a great job. Like I said, a lot of respect shown out there, and I really appreciate it. And then all the fans out there watching, supporting all of us. My number one fan watches all my races when they're broadcasted. Give a shout out to my mom. Love you.
I will say, Nathan, the usual guy here in the other broadcast booth, Jim, he's out of town this week, so I've been brought in as a replacement for this week. I believe next week as well. But don't worry, I have experience commentating many a fist fight in a Walmart parking lot here in the city of Philadelphia. But Nathan, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Congratulations on win number 3 this season, and looking forward to seeing you hit the racetrack at the Red Bull Ring in 1 week's time.
Can't wait. See you then.
And that right there was Nathan Biggert, a race winner at the end of a rather exciting night of racing action, it must be said, Hamish.
Yeah, it was. I mean, strategy was probably a big point for some drivers as well. Really picking when they come into pit lane, how they best, survive the tire wear as well, and how they best sort of keep the tires from not wearing too much. I think next week at the Red Bull Ring is going to be a big test for these drivers. I love going racing at the Red Bull Ring. You mentioned it, or Nathan mentioned it as well. Off track's going to be the major thing. Trying to keep the 1Xs to a minimum, trying to get the 4Xs to an absolute minimum as well. And then just picking your moments when you go for moves. I think we could be in for something quite chaotic next week, Ron, in terms of, obviously lap 1, turn 3, turn 4. And then even as well, down through 10 and 11 at the end of the circuit. So I think for drivers next week at the Red Bull Ring, they're going to have to keep themselves in check and keep themselves in line as well. Of course, as we said, next week is the Red Bull Ring, July 16th for round 4 of the season as we begin our little double header in Europe. The week after we'll be out at Alton Park for July 23rd. I'll be away for that one. but I believe Jim will be back for that one anyway. So we'll see how that one then pans out before we head back over towards the Americas and heading into Interlagos July 30th to end out the halfway point of the season as well. So the next 3 weeks are going to be fantastic. Of course, we've got 2 more Grand Prix style tracks coming up, and then one in terms of sports car racing for Alton Park coming up as well. So it's going to be a good couple of weeks. And then, yeah, next week, Red Bull Ring, I'm excited. It's my favorite track in the world, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal race once again.
Yeah, I know. I like the Red Bull Ring. I just think some of the off tracks heading off through there are the stuff of an iRacing driver's safety rating nightmare. Thankfully, these drivers won't have to worry about that. Instead, they'll just have to worry about another 1-hour race to look forward to here for round number 4 of the High Point GT Challenge in just 1 week's time here on MotorMouth Broadcasting. But as for this broadcast here tonight at Indianapolis for round number 3, I think that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mons, and Hamish Monroe working on the cameras and the graphics with me, and the comms on the virtual production hauler with the mic being in there. I say thank you all so very much for tuning into this broadcast here on MotorMouth Broadcasting tonight, and we hope to see you all for that race at the Red Bull Ring in just 1 week's time. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Good night.